No promises, but this may be the last comparison for the AT2040, at least for a while, unless I pick up something that needs a comparison to it. Welcome back to the Rebel Tech channel. I'm Justin, and in this video we're doing one more comparison between the AT2040 and the AT2035, covering all the 20 series microphones that I have against each other and making sure that I cover my bases and make sure that you guys are well informed about the microphones that I have and the microphones that you could potentially get. So without any further ado, let's dive into the build of these things. And I know that I've beaten this dead horse a lot, but I've covered these microphones a lot, and this comparison will be basically just an overview. Like most of my comparisons, they're an overview. If you're interested in anything that I miss or anything specific, which sometimes I miss in these comparisons, the individual videos will cover those specifics because obviously I can't make it too long. The AT2035 is definitely a well-built microphone. A little more chunky than the 2020 and definitely has that heftier build than the 2020. Compared to the 2040 over here, this is built like a classic dynamic microphone, broadcast dynamic microphone that really does a good job at being well-built. They just did a good job of building these things. Audio-Technica always does a good job of building these things. Any equipment that they make, any equipment that they put out is really well built, and they do take pride in what they do in that department. Now, as far as comparing these builds, I will give an upper hand to the AT2040 because of that reinforcement on the diaphragm and a lot of good things going on about it. So coming out of the build, AT2040 has a slight edge, so we'll see how it goes as we move on. Next up, let's get into some techie talking. Now I'm going to leave up a graphic of all the specs and tech that are in the manuals, and then I will point out the major things, the things that stand out, and the things that I want to talk about a little bit. So the first thing that stands out and the obvious thing is condenser microphone and dynamic microphone. Pretty easy. Phantom power, no phantom power. Unless you have a cloud lifter, in which case, or a fed head, you're going to need it. Next up, polar patterns. Cardioid, hypercardioid. Cardioid, a little more inflated, picks up a little bit more of that edge, and rejects the sides, rejects the back. And then we move on to the hypercardioid, where a little more honed in, slight pickup on the back, but it has some sweet spots that really has some good rejection. We'll get into off-axis rejection in this room and in the untreated room. If you've been here before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So just a quick test. I'm going to do it like this, and I'll do a little more room noise later. But let's do a little quick thing. AT2035 first. Moving around to 90 degree. This is what it's going to sound like, roughly about 2 to 4 inches away. Actually, it's probably like 4 or 5 inches, but whatever. Moving around to the back, this is what you're going to have with your off-axis rejection closer than I normally do. I'm trying to add in different things and help you guys out a little bit more. A little bit more thorough and efficient. AT2040. Let's go into the off-axis rejection. 90 degrees right here. Moving into that sweet spot back here. Obviously, I'm not going to go too far. I will in the test that we do. This is just a quick little test that I'm going to give you. Moving around to the other side, 90 degrees, and this is what you're going to hear. And obviously, we will do more. Next thing that stands out is their sensitivity. Now, this makes sense. Like I was saying before with the builds, obviously, based on what type of microphone they are, will determine certain things. So, a dynamic microphone is going to be more hefty than a condenser microphone. A condenser microphone is going to be more sensitive than a dynamic microphone. So, negative 53 decibels on the 2040, while the 2035 is negative 33. So, obviously, condenser microphone is going to be more sensitive than the dynamic. You will need less gain on the condenser than the 2040. Now, this comes into play depending on the preamps that you have. If you have high-end preamps, it really doesn't matter. If you have lower-end preamps, you might need a FET head for the 2040. With the 2035, you're probably going to be good with just about any preamp, unless it's really bad. Now, the last thing in techie talk, frequency response. I'll be quick about this. I'm not a huge fan of the 80 to 16 on the 2040, and the standard 20 to 20 on the 2035 is much better. I will just brush that off because we're going to get into the curve, and I'm really going to just give it a hard time. So techie talk goes to 2035 because it's just certain things about the AT2040 kind of rub me the wrong way. And now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the frequency response curves on a chart. And if you've been here before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So first up with the frequency response, let's go to the AT2040 because it's easy. Easy in the sense that I just want to get it over with the low end. 80 hertz cutoff, and it's aggressive. There's no switch, no nothing. It's natural to the microphone. If there was a switch, then I wouldn't have a problem with it, which we're going to talk about a switch over here. The AT2035 has a nice low end, very flat, easy, little below 0 decibels, but gives a nice presence in that low end. But there is a option for a 80 hertz low cut filter, high pass filter, whatever you want to call it. So that option allows you to be more flexible with how you use it. The 2040 does not have that option. If you were to tell me, now, this microphone, the only difference between this microphone and the 2020, other than the fact that it sounds a little different, comparison is on my channel as well, so if you're interested in that, is the switches. And it's $50 more. And it comes with a shock mount in some aspects. I don't know of all the aspects. But it's roughly about $50 more. Which means it's about $25 to $30 more for a high-pass filter to be engaged. Because the other one to be put in, not engaged. Well, you know what I mean. The 10 dB pad, I could do without. You don't need it. At least in this department. So if you're telling me it's like $20, $30 more and you got a high pass filter put in and you tune it to the point where it's fully there, 20 to 20, or even like I'll take like the ZDM1, 50 to 18, I'll take it with that option. But they didn't do it. They could have done it. They've shown that they could do it with one of their other microphones, but let's move on to the mids before I go on a tangent. The 2040 certainly has a nice midsection, scoops it out a little bit depending on the person, depending on the source that you're putting in. It's really a specific thing because certain mids on certain people are more aggressive than others. Most people land in that midsection. Obviously, some people lean to the low mids, some people lean to the high mids, but for the most part, we all land right in that midsection, which is why a flat midsection is always good. Little scooped here, pretty flat, so it's not too bad. On the 2035 side, we have a pretty much really flat midsection. I really love it. I'm not going to get into numbers because it's just, I've talked about it a lot. If you're interested in the specific numbers and stuff like that about the frequency response, you could check out the individual videos. Now finally, the highs. The 2040 has a nice rise and comes up to a peak with a presence boost and then tapers off like every other microphone. I really do like the high end on this microphone. It's really good. It sounds great, but it is a little narrow, which kind of gives it a little restriction with who's it for and who can make it sound good or fit someone's tone, fit someone's content, whatever it is. It's just that high end I like, but overall, eh. On the 2035, we have some nice presence boost later in the highs, some peaks as we move into the highs, but there's one presence boost higher that is nice, depending on the person, depending on the voice, will determine if it affects you a lot. It is on that higher spectrum, so if you have a lower voice, this might not affect you as much. If you have a higher voice, that might give you that nice presence boost in some of your stronger tones. So coming out of the frequency response curve, I got to give it to the 2035. You got the option for the 80 hertz low cut filter, and there's a 10 dB pad. All right, so let's do the noise test, and we'll do the off-axis rejection. We're going to just be quiet for a bit and see the natural sounds of everything going on. There is a whiny dog upstairs and maybe some people walking around, so I apologize for that, but it's a good example of hearing what may be around you and understanding what these microphones do in rejection of those noises. There's also a dehumidifier and my fan on my computer going on, so things you may have to deal with as well. Alright, so I'm about 2-3 feet away from the fronts of the microphones. Remember, hypercardioid over here on the 2040 and cardioid on the 2035. I will mention this again throughout this test and all these tests. So this is going to be the off-axis rejection distance test. Next up, 90-degree test on the 2040 side on stage left. Yeah, I know my left from right. This is what it's going to sound like in the studio here, mildly treated room, and the wall opposite of me has a lot of stuff on it, so probably not a lot of reflection back, but the size of the room certainly does help with the small size and stuff in it. So keep that in mind if you have a bedroom like this, if you have an office like this, something like that. Now moving into the sweet spot, 120 to 150 degrees. This is what you're going to hear with the off-axis rejection. This is where the 2040 will shine in its rejection. The 2035 certainly has a good rejection as well with the cardioid polar pattern, but I think the 2040 definitely has it in this department. And I'm about a foot away from the 2040 right now and a little further away from the 2035. I'm about 2-3 feet away from the rears of the microphones. This is your 180 degree test in your off-axis rejection in the studio. This is what it's going to sound like from behind. Not too sexy, but a little bit. Remember, hypercardioid has a little bit of pickup on the back. It's traditionally known to have a little bit of pickup on the back. You might be hearing more of my reflection back off the wall. It's not much, but let me know down in the comments what you think about this. All right, so we're in the booth right now with the AT2035 and the AT2040. And I'm listening to the 2035 right now and noticing that I gotta say that off the bat, I listened to this for a little bit before. And it's just one of those things that I'm listening to the 2035 and it's a nice, well-rounded sound. I gotta admit. Now moving to the 2040, and you get that. I'm about like 2 inches away, and you get that mid-forwardness. It's just a little bit on my voice. It's very nasally. If you have a nasally voice, and if you deal with allergies or some type of congestion going on, it could be that buzz that I don't really like, and I don't really like it in my voice, but certain microphones emphasize it a lot. So with this microphone, you probably want to get up a little bit closer on it, and it sounds pretty good when you get up close, but how many people really know that, or how many people really want to just be right up on their microphone and try to get that gravelly sound? I don't know. I mean, it's up to you. It depends on what you want to do with it. But I will say right off the bat, I will give the upper hand to the 2035 because it's one of those things that now that I switched back after listening to the 2040, it's a much more, you see what's missing. You could hear the missing tones. And of course, the pad and the low cut filter are not engaged, which let's do a quick test to see if we notice a similarity with the 80 hertz naturally cut off to the cutoff here that is added. Okay, so the low cut filter is on, high pass, if you will. And you notice that you're cutting off that 80 hertz and lower. It's starting to emphasize those mids. And I do think those highs are nice, but the mids are kind of emphasized. Now, of course, this is depending on the source, depending on what you're using it for, will determine if you're actually going to use this. Now, as we move over to the 2040, I don't know. This is very strange because I noticed that it's mid-forward, but it's mid-forward in a different way. Not a weird way. Well, actually a weird way. In a different way. than the 2035. This one here, with the low cutoff engaged, gives that mids to mid-highs emphasis. This gives that mid-low to mids emphasis. Now that the low cutoff is off on the 2035, you notice that you got the full range of the 20 to 20. And that's what you want in a microphone, at least in my opinion, naturally. It's better to have the option than not because, I don't know, it's just, I'd rather spend a little bit more, like this is a little bit more, than not have the option at all. Let's do a plosive test. Very disappointed with that reinforcement. It's not as good as they make it out to be. Now with the SE Electronics, that makes a huge difference. 2035, which obviously it's a condenser and there's less enforcement, but let's see. Yeah. With the SE Electronics, yep, it's always good. Got to back it up a bit. If you use a metal mesh pop filter, just know, back it up a bit because it redirects the plosive and the bursts of air. So you don't want to redirect it into the microphone. Kind of defeats the purpose of having it. You guys let me know down in the comments what you think about that. And we're going to do the untreated room test right now. If you've been following along with the videos that have been coming out lately, you notice that I'm wearing the same exact thing, the same exact hat, and this is the same exact day. It just seems to be darker out. Yeah, I'm doing this all at once. Untreated room, AT2035 and 2040. Almost forgot the microphones that were on this stand. And there are no switches engaged on this one here. If you want those examples in the untreated room, go check out the other videos, other comparisons, and the individual one specifically. So what we're going to do here, a noise test, just normally the room tone and the fan on. All right, so you may have heard some traffic going on the road over there. It's a little ways away, probably a house or two away. And it's not too crazy of a traffic area, but there are cars going around because it's rush hour at this time. Let's do the fan. All right, so that's a little example of a ceiling fan going on with your microphones. I think the hypercardioid is going to be much better with that rejection of noise in my tests that I've done. And I didn't do the mix between that and my voice because just you could check out the other videos and you got the idea of how it's going to be. Obviously, it's going to be noisy, so if you want to stay cool in your room in those hotter months or if you're in a warmer area, you're just going to have to deal with it. One way or another, deal with the noise or deal with the heat, so just keep that in mind. Here's your distance test, about a foot away from the fronts of the microphones. You probably hear a different tone, probably more treble, more room noise with my voice, probably more echo or reverb, however you want to take it. And this is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room, and I apologize if I repeat myself a bunch of times, but that's just the way it is when you're doing tests like this. Alright, 90-degree test, AT2040 side stage, right? This is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room, and like I said, there's windows over there, you might have some reflection off of those, but there is a lot of stuff in the room, so you probably don't have too much echo, too much reverb. Sweet spot right here, 120 to 150 degrees. This is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room. Remember, area rug underneath it, a lot of stuff in the room. Still speaking towards those windows. And this is what it's going to be like if you have a very similar room, or maybe not. Depends on where you record. Alright, lastly, 180-degree test. I'm about a foot away from the rears of the microphones. And traditionally, the hypercardioid has more pickup in the rear than a cardioid. But I noticed that the AT2040 has some excellent rejection of noise. So keep that in mind when you're making the decision on a microphone and relate it to the room that you're in. So hopefully this helps with the rejection of noise. Now that is the AT2035 versus the AT2040, and in my opinion the 2035 is the better option overall. And I know that it's a person-to-person thing, and I'm not saying this is the only right answer. There are plenty of right answers. It depends on the content that you're making. If you're doing more singing, more voiceover work and things like that, I would lean towards the 2035, more flexible, and it's a condenser, more detail and things like that. With the AT2040, it's a really nice build, and if you like that mid-forward sound, it's not muddy, it's just mid-forward. I give it a hard time on its tone and the narrowness of the frequency response, but it really is something that is based on the listener and based on what you want to get out of your microphone. It's not a bad tone, it's just not for me. I don't want to be all negative against it. I get enough with that with the Zoom ZDM1. I'm very negative against its build. But there are redeeming qualities for all these microphones. And of course, you just need to make that decision for yourself. And I'm just here to give you the information that I have. And of course, I'm going to give you my opinion because I did the video. And if you take my opinion seriously, you should go check out other videos. I know that I'm only one person in this world that has talked about microphones, and one of many that talks about them on YouTube. And maybe I'm the only one who does these comparisons this specific, but there are plenty of examples with people talking into the 2040, the 2035, and you need to understand different tones and different people speaking into those microphones so you could relate to them. The best way to do it is find the right person who is relatable to you and relatable to your tone of your voice. You need to be honest with yourself when it comes to that. And they will give you the best representation of what you will get out of it. That all being said, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. It helps this video, helps this channel, and it gets out to more people. Probably by the time this video is out, we are going to be at 1K subscribers, but that shouldn't stop you from subscribing to the Rebel Tech channel. That should be a reason to subscribe to the Rebel Tech channel, because now we have more milestones to hit. Thousands and thousands of subscribers that possibly could happen. You could be one of them. So if you're interested in my vibe around here, I do tech stuff and things like that. Obviously, microphone reviews and a ton of comparisons to boot. So if you're interested in something like that, please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell to know when new videos are coming out and live streams that are going to be happening. Mondays will be the live stream day for the remainder of the calendar year in 2021, just in case you're watching this in 2022. And in 2022, I'll readdress the stream day. Could be the same, might be different, depends on what happens in my life. One last thing, if you have any questions, you can leave it down in the comments section, and we could discuss these microphones. We could discuss tech and everything like that. All I ask is you be nice, constructive, and all that stuff. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Proper exposure. Oh my sweet baby Jesus. Oh my God. Let me touch your toes. Yeah. Swing the toes. Just little kids in the feet. We do not kink shame on the Rebel Tech channel. We accept all people. All kinks.